Good morning, West Coast friend.
Good morning, East Coast friend. How are you?
I am arriving today like a typical Monday. like things just started going and they just didn't stop. Yeah, and then as we say, sliding in hot, sliding in hot. How are you arriving this morning?
I am arriving well, actually. I actually got a meditation in this morning, which is super rare for me. So I'm feeling like a little zen, but the trees are blowing like crazy because we have a winter storm warning up here in Truckee. So just hoping my internet is solid for the next few minutes here while we're talking to our friends on Facebook Live.
It's going to be great. It's going to be solid. And I always imagine, because I love snow so much, I love imagining you up there in those evergreens coated in snow. So nice image.
Awesome. So what are we talking about today?
Well, we just finished this series on remote teaming, and we thought it would be good to kind of have one of our conversations that we do, the kind that we often have offline. We figured, well, hey, why not have it live? So one of the things we thought we'd kind of cover three things in our time. It's like 15 minutes, but we wanted to cover kind of what are we experiencing, as it relates to leading pLink during this year of 2021, which has been another unusual year. And then follow that with some of what we're hearing from our clients, just give folks a sense of the themes. And then our finale, not to build it up too much, but our finale will be any kind of reframes that our clients have found helpful and tips as we close out this year and head into 2022, which proves to be another interesting year. So let's just start a little bit we've been growing pLink since 2013. So what has your experience been like with our team this year, our company and our team, keeping in mind that we're 100% remote, which means there is no brick and mortar, right? There's no corporate office. And that presents both challenges and freedom. So what has that been like from your perspective?
Yeah, so over the last few years.
Well, I think in particular, the last year, maybe 2020, because I think COVID added a really interesting dynamic to the mix.
Yeah, it's, well, first of all, I enjoyed celebrating that we had done a lot of work up front to get ourselves, because we've been remote for so long, we were ready. So when COVID came, it was an easy pivot. So for that, I think often we don't take enough time to celebrate the preparation and opportunity meet. And so it was worth just a little shout out especially for you who pushed us so much to get ready for that. And ready for virtual years ago, that was super helpful instead of being really scary. But there was a lot of pivoting that happened even for us as a remote company. And I think one of the experiences that was interesting is that our team is a pretty close team. And so we had to create some space for just to be present for what people were going through. And for me, it was remembering to check in with people, remembering to see how they were doing, what was happening in their world, because our spouses aren't on remote teams, and our families, we have people with little kids, we have people with big kids going to college. And so many experiences were kind of upset by the complexity that the world offered us, that it was important to make space for that. And so I did a lot of that last year. And then also it was exciting because there was a lot of opportunities in terms of what we could do virtually so easily. It was like, oh, just hop on with me. We'll just record that. Or when we did the recent L10 conference, Life Sciences conference in Colorado, they asked us to record an hour-long webinar. And we just hopped on and recorded it and then hopped off and hit send after we uploaded it. So that was great because we had a lot of preparation. But what has it been like for you?
I just want to say that I think what you just celebrated in that moment could easily go by, but how this is when something really pays dividends, right? But because we've been doing all of this other delivery that requires recording and uploading and making sure you're in the right platform and that your file ends up in the right format, that doing something like you did for L10 really becomes an easy yes. at that point, instead of it being something that's hard. So
Right.
that is, as we often had said way back in the beginning of our coaching days, when you build the program for the first time, whatever it might be, there's really a very, very little return on investment. But as you continue to do it, your return grows, not just financially, but in terms of energy invested.
Yeah, 100%.
My experience has been that although we were prepared for delivering virtually, COVID, in particular these last 2 years, has been a period of really rapid growth. And so there are challenges that come along with scaling. In scaling, remote team and a remote organization presents its own unique challenges.
Yeah.
So for us, it made me think about how, when they talk about how many M&As fail, like 80% of M&As fail, and it's not because they can't get the processes to work together, but because they can't get the cultures to work together, right? And so I was thinking about really the challenges of the last couple of years have been a small percentage as it relates to infrastructure, right? What do we need to do differently to get people up to speed faster, to automate some of the processes that we were able to do manually when we were smaller? That's like 30% of the challenge. It's as Cindy would say, a technical challenge. We can get on that. But the other 70% of the challenge has been in managing the complexity of the human interaction side of things. When you are scaling and adding new folks, when you're doing new material, when you're doing new material at scale, when you're learning new technologies, people are already really busy and you're saying, hey, we're implementing this new platform because it's a better solution for us. And just managing all of that and making sure that people are staying synced up. And I think, I'm such a visual person that the imagery that I have is like a potato sack race, right? You can really only both get across that field if you're paying attention to how the legs that are tied together are working together. It doesn't matter how fast your outside leg is going or how intentional you are about getting to the other side of the field if you're not attending to the part of you that's connected. And that is really what we have been paying attention to in this last year, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think the systems and bringing people along has been a big part of it. And it's interesting for any company to scale, but to scale remotely is different, right? Because you don't get to have somebody just come in and you can't sit next to them and physically and show them things and talk to them and connect with them. And so you're managing building the relationship alongside of helping build the trust in the company, understand the systems, understand how they work. And then when you bring new people as well, what's wonderful is they have new insights and ideas. And then often you find yourself kind of explaining how you got there and having to kind of rethink like, oh, how did we get here? And why do we do it this way? Is it worth doing it this way? Or should we relook at it? And so then we have to manage our own stuff too, right? As that comes up. I found some of that last year as well, which is a great thing as a professional development or a leadership development professional. Watching yourself go through that, you can kind of just chuckle at yourself along the way, like, oh, look, there I go. Such a great thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great year. This kind of intensity helps us actually recognize when we can drop into the reactive, and then how do we self-coach ourselves into a creative response, even when, that knee-jerk reaction is one that's you just want to solve it quickly and make it go away. So one of the things that we were talking about or talking about is what we're hearing from our clients in reframes. And I thought I just would share an example, and maybe that would inspire you to think about some of the things you've been hearing from your clients thematically.
Yeah.
But I was talking with one of my clients, and this actually has come up over and over and over again. But in this particular conversation, the client was raising how hard or how worried they were about their culture and how they were going to manage intentional culture development in this hybrid world. And to be clear, like pLink is 100% remote. And a lot of our organizations, a lot of our clients are dealing with hybrid, which is a different layer of complexity, right? It's a little easier if we're all remote or all in person. So we definitely want to acknowledge that. That being said, it's just a layer of complexity. It doesn't make it impossible or more possible. It's just an extra thing to be thinking about. Anyway, in this story, the client shared with me, Gretchen, I'm just super curious about what you're hearing as it relates to culture and struggling with culture with these hybrid teams. And it really gave me an opportunity to stop for a minute and think about the fact that there's a lot of chatter going on about how hard virtual is, how hard it is to learn virtually, how hard it is to build relationships virtually, how hard it is to manage a team virtually, how hard it is to manage productivity virtually. And what I would say is that all of those challenges, including the cultural one, have been a challenge for decades. At least the 3 that I've been doing this work, and for many of the ones before. So those challenges are human challenges. It isn't about whether we're virtual or in-person. Culture and creating the culture you want has been an issue for leaders for decades. We just have an opportunity now to do it differently in this environment. And in many ways, we have a really great opportunity because there are things that we can do virtually, like faster, broader coverage, more intentional individual moments we can do virtually much more efficiently than we can in person. So that is a reframe, and it was a reframe for this client when I said, hang on a second, this isn't a fresh challenge. We have some fresh approaches to dealing with it, but it is a familiar challenge.
Yeah.
So like pushing off that, what have been some of the reframes that you've offered your clients?
So there's definitely a lot of talk about burnout. And oftentimes people will associate the burnout with work. And really what we're seeing are boundaries. And so it's just such a great opportunity for us being home all the time, for most of the people who are working from home or working hybrid, where you're sometimes in the office and sometimes at home, which is the case for many of our clients now, to revisit our boundaries and to revisit what is important to us and what we want to set intentional time aside for. And I hear more times clients who will say, oh, I block an hour for myself to read email each day, but then I give it away. And it's like, well, let's talk about why you give that away. You've committed to yourself that you're going to block this time for this thing that has to be done. Like, you can't just not do it. And yet then you're saying, sure, put a meeting on top of that. And so by saying yes to the meeting, what are you saying no to? So I've really been helping our clients reframe this idea of recommitting to boundaries, recommitting to what's important to them, recommitting to and revisiting why it's important to take those strategic pauses, to build time in our schedule. Like, we opened up and I, jokingly said I meditated this morning for the first time, but being able to create that time and space for us to collect ourselves, to think about what is the most important work I'm working on today, is a great thing. And now we've got, many of us are saving hours not commuting back and forth to work. And so being able to recommit to an exercise routine, being able to recommit. I mean, I know you've been a boss at yoga all year long. You've been really crushing that. And we've been able to do a lot of things now that there's not all this travel and stuff, reconnecting to family time. And so I just think it's a great opportunity. We've seen a lot of people using work to numb and kind of to get away from the complexity. It's like, well, work is certain. I know what needs to be done. The rest of my life, not so certain. So I'll just hang out here for 12 hours a day because it's comfy. However, that leads to other things that don't feel so good. So just really thinking about, like, what is important to me and where do I need to be intentional?
I do that, by the way. I do that thing where I make a commitment and then I give that commitment away to something else that takes precedent. And so one of the ways that I've learned how to deal with that, knowing that about myself, I laugh all the time. Like, I think I'm a pretty accommodating person, and And I want to be able to say yes, but the downfall of that is that I end up infringing on my own boundaries, and over time, with the pattern of that, I lose track of the things that I've said are a priority to me, like staying connected and grounded. And so one of the things that I've come into the habit of doing, there's two things. One is the power of threes. So I notice that if I don't do my yoga practice for 3 days in a row, I lose connection with myself. I lose that sense of groundedness.
Yeah.
If I bring my yoga practice back in and I say, okay, no matter how heavy I feel the weight of everything I need to do, I'm going to commit to doing this at least 3 days in a row. By the third day, I can feel those benefits. And so I've gotten in the habit of working those threes, right? Like not letting something slide more than 3 days. And then if it does, this is the second habit, is a recalibration. So I check in with myself on a regular basis, if not every day, every other day, bless you, with just kind of, what do I need more of? That question, what am I craving? What do I need more of? And then that answer tells me what I need to shift in my priorities. So sometimes it's spaciousness. What do I need more of? Space, so that I can think, reflect, connect some dots. Anyway, those are kind of an easy, a free way of working with some of the reality that we're in right now. Recalibration and working in that power of threes.
Definitely. And I mean, it does take some commitment and to be able to just say, I'm turning off my phone. One of the things I did, I guess it was last year on vacation, I turned off my Slack notifications on my phone. Like I just muted them, and I've never turned them back on. Yet I'm still fully connected and keeping up with stuff on a daily basis. I'm not missing anything, but I don't check it every time it comes through, because before it was so hard not to. I was like, oh, Gretchen sent me a Slack, wonder what she said, or like, oh, Cindy's reaching out, Renika's reaching out, it's like, okay, just, you don't need to look at that right now, right? You're brushing your teeth. You can wait 2 minutes and you can do it after.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, which you say, like, I mean, we're laughing, but to be fair, like, you got to remember, like, Alexis lives in California, right on the West Coast. So by the time she wakes up, half the team has already been up and productive. So when she says, I'm looking at that while I'm brushing my teeth, you can understand why that would happen that way. And if you don't protect that space and time, you can end up giving away your sort of sacred rhythms of the morning.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Something interesting that came up on our polls. So we did some polls on LinkedIn and Facebook about some questions for people since they've been working remotely. And one of them was, I'm aware of what my body language is communicating. And so I think let's talk a little bit about that, because another challenge and opportunity I've seen throughout this is the opportunity to learn how to read body language and to express body language over Zoom. There's some kind of belief that, if you're on Zoom, you can't read someone's body language, even though you can see their body moving on Zoom, right? And so, 40% of the people said they can almost always be aware of what their body language is communicating. 40% said, sometimes I am. And then 20% said almost never. For me, I have found that I'm way more tuned into my body language because we're on Zoom all the time. Like I just stare at myself all day. Yes. And I'm like, what am I doing? I'm all hunched over, or like I'm leaning in, or I look disconnected. Like you can check in with yourself. So what is it like for you?
That cracks me up. So when we were in meeting rooms all the time, one of the things that used to make me laugh is when people would have their phones and they would put them underneath the table and they'd be tapping away. As if like nobody knows what this posture means, right? Like, it's like everybody knows. So the same thing is true on Zoom, right? If you're kind of looking, but you're sort of not, you're off in the distance and you're kind of, you can see your arms sort of tapping away. Like everybody knows you're multitasking on email, right? Like that's happening. So I think the same thing. I think it's really, one of our pLink said this in the interviews, like the greatest gift you can give somebody is your attention. And that connectivity is not the same thing as connection, right? That was actually Angie and Stacy. Both have contributed those points. And so when you're going to be on and be connected and give that feedback. I mean, I know you and I, like, sometimes we'll be in a larger meeting, and I can remember in my lifetime you slacking me saying, hey, you look distracted, what's going on? Like, and this is earlier in the whole process of this, but just an opportunity to be transparent with folks about what you're dealing with, and this whole BRB, right? Be right back.
Yeah.
I think that is really an important piece of this. And I just want to say, and I don't know whether I can say this or not, but my RBF is pretty rough. So I have to be careful about that. And it's not a bad thing, folks. If you have an RBF, you may want to just think about, like, if you're just listening, cover part of it while you're listening. So you don't, because people, especially if they're nervous, people make up stories about what's going on with your face.
Yeah.
And if you've got a face that is like stone, then you're going to want to think about how to offset that with your energy or otherwise.
Yeah. We just have a few minutes left. And so let's talk a little bit about some tips there may be people who are navigating. I mean, nobody's really navigating a remote team for the first time anymore, since we've been in this for about a year and a half now, but they may be like past survival mode, and now, like, what can I do to really help my team thrive right now while we're both remote and hybrid? Because we recognize that while some teams are still fully remote, there are other teams where the expectation is you're going in once or twice a week, and now that's bringing up all kinds of new opportunities for us to think about, like, how do we want to show up for that, and what would be important to focus on, and what's the rhythm look like, and all that. So maybe we can spend the last few minutes sharing some tips about what we've seen other leaders do, what we're trying in our organization that's really working.
Okay, you go first.
I go first. Okay, so our favorite, if you've read any of our content, any of our rooms, watched any of our videos, you're going to hear this connection before content. And that is really what you saw Gretchen and I do as soon as we hopped on Facebook Live. First thing she said was, "How are you, my West Coast friend?" Taking time for the human connection. It is a slow as smooth, smooth as fast practice. If you have 10 people come into a Zoom meeting and you only have 30 minutes, if you spend like 6 minutes up front, just having everyone share what is one, how are you arriving today? Whether it's red, yellow, green, whether it's an emotion state, whether, it's a quick phrase for how you're arriving, it just helps set the tone. So like if I'm arriving having, just had a really tough call about something personal in my life, and I tell everybody that, then they're not going to be expecting me to be all, "Oh, that's amazing, that's great." They're going to know what's happening for me, and they're not going to make up stories about it. If Gretchen comes in and she says, "Things are great, I'm feeling really good today, I got my to-do list done," that's great. I know she's going to be fully present. And so that taking that time, people always say, like, we don't have time for that. But what happens is, in the absence of it, people will do all kinds of weird things to be seen and make sure that people know what's going on for them, and take that time anyway. So you might as well be constructive about it. It builds trust, it creates genuine connection, and it makes your meeting go better. Mm-hmm. That's my first one. How about you?
So I think I have two. So I'll give two and then I'll be done. So one is to be super intentional about your cadence of interaction and communication, right? So you want to build as much predictability into the system as possible, which means one of our modules is cadence of communication. And so what this means is that you have meetings that are pre-scheduled, meetings that are about bringing everybody along at the same place, like an all hands or an all staff. You have meetings that are about one-to-one, helping to make sure your folks are getting exactly what they need to keep doing the work that they're doing. You have meetings that are about like launching a project, but don't smush them all together. Like, you want to just really be clear about the intention of the meeting and how often it's happening and when it's happening. And you will find that people will be patient to wait for that meeting, for that right forum, instead of people trying to kind of layer stuff on in another meeting, which takes things off topic and really confuses everything and pretty much ends up wasting people's time.
Yeah.
The second piece of it is that the second sort of tip, I guess, or idea I have is to make the distinction between transactional and relational. I think this is probably the foundational principle that goes underneath everything we're doing. And it's very easy when you're in a hurry, when you're under pressure from time, when you're depleted, when you haven't been taking care of yourself, when you're under a deadline, when resources are scarce, any of those things that put pressure on us, it is really easy to slide into a transactional interaction. And a transactional interaction doesn't have any woo in it. There's no genuine interest. There's no time for that connection. And a relational interaction says, like, no matter what is going on here, I know that this can be boosted by us just connecting human to human. And this is as true over the conveyor belt at the grocery store as it is in our teams and our meetings. And it doesn't matter how familiar you are with the person. You and I have been friends for a long time. And it's really important. Every once in a while, we can slide on the transactional, but always with a circle back to say, hey, I noticed that I kind of skipped right into that. But if you are in the habit of being transactional because you think that's the way things get accomplished, it's a good opportunity to step back from that and think about it. Because in this new era of business, hybrid, in person or 100% remote, that relational, that ability to be relational, even in the micro moments, is going to be a huge differentiator. It's going to foundationally change how you lead, who comes to your teams, how you achieve your outcomes, all of it.
100%. I agree with that. So important. In fact, a ton of our coaching clients are working on that. How do I be more relational? What does it look like to have, be appropriately vulnerable with my team and be relational? So super important. I have two more for you, and then we'll wrap up for the day and send you back on your way. The first one is when you're communicating and you're not in person, you're doing it over some virtual platform, whether it's email or it's Slack or it's Teams, Chatter, whatever your communication text is, inserting your intention when you ask for something. I need this, I need the numbers on, the amount of routes that were driven yesterday. And you might say, my intention is I'm drafting a report for the senior team this afternoon. Okay, then I know I need to stop what I'm doing and get that immediately, right? Or I need to, I understand the person's intention, not why they don't make up a story. And so being able to do that, or if you're asking a question, we often say insert curious tone. Mm-hmm. And it's like, it even changes it for me. Right? Like when I write insert curious tone, it's like, I'm genuinely curious. Like, I want to understand how this works. Like, I'm not asking like, why is it that way? It's like, hey, why do we do it this way? Insert curious tone. And so that can be really helpful. The other thing is as things are changing and evolving, if you are at a company that is hybrid and remote, and you've got some people 100% remote, some people hybrid, some people full-time in the office, and things are changing, as the leaders, own the change. If you guys put something into place in January and come March, you're like, this isn't working, we need to change the policy, that's okay. What's not okay is changing the policy and not saying, hey, we take ownership, we put this policy into place in January thinking it would work. After watching it for a couple of months of a pilot, it's not working. We apologize, this is the new thing. That's really helpful for people as they're going through all of the change as well, for us as leaders to own our part. We tried it, it didn't work, we're trying something different. We'll let you know how that is in a month. So those are two pieces that I've seen some leaders do a really good job at over the last few months and years. So I think that wraps us for today with our remote teaming live, and just
it. And I would just say, we wish you very happy holidays and a happy new year. We look forward to seeing you in 2022, and stay tuned for our newest series that will premiere in early 2022 on resiliency.
Resiliency 2022. We're coming for you.
Yeah.
And your well-being. All right.
Yeah. All right.
Good to see you, Gretchen.
You too. Always so fun.